there folks, and welcome back to the Tower Tech. We are redoing a stream that I tried to do a couple of weeks ago and ran into a load of technical problems. That stream is a flight in a twin-engine Beechcraft Baron B58 that we're flying from Coventry Airport, which is not too far from where I live, all the way out to Bristol, which is where I went to university and spent a jolly long period of my life. So we're going to be flying this in VR this evening. Big changes in the system. The previous stream that we did, we actually only had the one PC. It was all being run on my 24-core Threadripper 3960X. And this time round, we've actually got two systems. So I'm actually in the process of building a new gaming system. So the old system will be a streaming system. This new system will be the kind of gaming system. Interestingly, you probably noticed that I'm a little distracted because Microsoft Flight Simulator decided to crash on me about 30 seconds before I was due to cut over to the head and shoulders shot that you see. So as I'm rambling on, I'm furiously rebooting the other machine, which of course I wouldn't have been able to have done if it was a one PC setup. I have a very nasty suspicion that Steam VR is going to throw a wobbly and decide not to come up, but we shall see. Fingers crossed it won't be too long before we're back into the stream. It's always the way with these things, isn't it? That you, there we go. Yeah, we're having connection problems very predictably. It's always the way with these things that you try them over and over and over throughout the day, and they work absolutely fine. And then as you come to actually do the stream, all of the things that have been working perfectly fine all throughout the day now start to all go wrong. So I'm actually going to have to flip you back over to the intro screen whilst I try and get this system sorted out. So apologies for that, folks. Please bear with us. We've got a few technical problems that we need to sort out. We're going to resolve those and we will be back with you shortly. Okay, folks, I have just had to reboot the gaming machine 11 billion times. We had Microsoft Flight Simulator crash, and then very predictably, Steam VR decided to throw a wobbly. We've got Steam VR back up and running. Just double check that that's the case. It is. Let's see if we can get ourselves back into Microsoft Flight Simulator. Not the quickest game to start up, but if it does, we should be motoring. Whilst we're waiting for that to come up, let me show you the planned route that we're doing. Of course, I had these opened as tab windows, but they've now all closed, so I'll have to do those again from scratch. Okay, so we are flying from Coventry Airport, which is just here. That's EGBE. We're flying through the low airways. So we're going to fly to this VOR here, HON, and then we're going to fly from HON down to Compton, that's CPT. We are then going to use one of the approaches into Bristol. So that is, we bring Bristol up. The approach that we will be using will be this one. So that is via a waypoint called Pomax, and you can see Pomax on the chart here as well. So coming from Compton over to Pomax here, then direct into Bristol, and then we will be landing on runway 27 using the ILS. The ILS chart is here. It's a nice, simple, direct route. We're not going to be using real-time weather. We're going to be doing a dusk landing, so that should give us some nice atmospheric lighting. But Microsoft Flight Simulator seems to be back with us, which is grand. Just make sure that we've got the right audio settings, because plugging VR headsets in has a habit changing all of that. Yes, index, yes. Yes, we're using the Valve Index for those of you that are curious. Hopefully you've got a bit of in-game audio coming through there now as well. But we will get straight into this. We're going to wind time back just a smidgeroo. Just a smidgeroo. To sort of, yeah, I think sort of that sort of time, just as dusk is descending upon the world. And we want Coventry. We won't start direct from the airport because we're going to want to dial route in. Let's jump in onto that. Okay. Stuff is to be working now. Not plugged in my throttle. Let me just do that for 2 seconds. Creaky chair, apologies for that. Okay. Okay, so the aircraft is golden dark. Make sure, yep, Bravo throttle's working, that's working. And the rudder pedals are working, hooray! We're making progress, right. Let's get, we're just going to do this bit temporarily, just on a flat screen, just because the G1000 is okay to read in VR. It's not the easiest to read in when you're doing the navigation stuff. So I'm going to get this up and started fairly quickly. Apologies if it feels like I'm rushing through this, but get our fuel on. Get the fuel to turn. There we go. Okay, the Garmin's up. Oh, I've just realised you can't see the camera I've set up for the throttle. Hey ho, well, we're not going to mess around anymore, I don't think. We're just going to get into the game. The more I mess around, the more likely we are to have further technical problems. Right, let's get the left prop going. One's going. Grand. Get the right one going. Alternator on. Great. Okay, so let's get our route dialed in nice and quick. So, flight plan. And we want... starting with Coventry Airport, of course, which is E... G... E. Then to Hon. In Britain that we want, then to CPT, what I'll do once we finish this video is I'll put a timestamp in it, I think, so if anyone comes back to watch it they can avoid the repetitiveness of watching the intro screen over and over. CPT. Cool, right, that's in. Then to Panax. That's our standard approach into Bristol. Doesn't take too long to dial this in. Obviously, if you've got lots of waypoints, it takes a bit longer. It's fairly intuitive to use. Max. And last but certainly not least is Bristol. EGGD. The challenge with flight sims in VR and streaming them, as fun as it is, you've got an awful lot of different technologies all going on, and there's plenty of opportunity for stuff to go wrong. Right, grand. Okay, that is dialed in. Let's get the ILS dialed in for Bristol. That's 11015. And it is 267. $7,000, and we'll get that back to GPS. Okay, I think we're all dialed in and good to go. Let's see if we can get ourselves into VR. That is a good sign. Looks like the audio from the VR headset is working as well. Awesome sauce. Right, we are good to go. Okay, right, toe brakes down. Parking brake off. Okay, right. I think we are good to go. Get ourselves onto the runway and lined up. Let's move that cursor out of the way. New system that I'm using for gaming has got Ryzen 5800X, which is not an older Lake Intel, the new ones that have come out, but still a very, very, very good CPU with a very good instructions per clock. And Microsoft Flight Simulator is a very, very CPU bound game, and the Threadripper is great at media production because of all the cores, but its IPC is feeling a little dated just now, so that's made a substantial difference. We've also got 3080 Ti in this system, and I have to say the VR performance is substantially better, very noticeably better. As in the render scale, I had at 80% previously. I've got it 100% on this system. Just get a heading bug lined up with the runway heading, and hopefully that's the end of the faffing and we can just enjoy a flight. Okay, that's the heading bug lined up. Right, let's get the aircraft into the air. Okay, full power. Airspeed alive. $80 knots, rotate. Vertical speed. Gear up. Okay, a right turn to start to get us on our route. Not going to play around with the pitch and the prop just yet. Make sure that we've got maybe a reasonable amount of height in the air. Coming up on 1,300 feet to get ourselves leveled off. Okay, let's bring ourselves back to 2500 and 25 inches of manifold pressure. Continue our climb. We're going to be climbing up to 7,000 feet initially. Get that dialed in. Should have really done that before I'd taken off. There we go, that's 7,000 feet. We're going to leave it on manual just for now. That looks absolutely breathtaking. That is awesome looking. Need to keep pushing the throttle forward as we climb, and as the air gets thinner, less pressure in the engine means less power to the props. Okay. Let's get ourselves a little better range on the map. There we go. Keep pushing those throttles forward. Of course we will, in the not too distant future, get to a point where those throttles won't go forward any further than they are. So going up, that's 4,500 feet. I'm going to keep climbing all the way up to 7,000 because we're on a heading between 0 and 180 degrees. We want to be at odd altitudes. I should say 0 to 179 degrees, and anything from 180 to 364 degrees we want to be at even altitudes. So that's all looking good. Can't push the throttle forward anymore, so that'll do what it's going to do as we continue our climb up to 7,000 feet. Alright, get a bit of trim in on the aircraft. I'm applying a fair bit of back pressure actually still to the yoke. That's looking good. Okay, nice, happy with that. So 6,000 feet, 1,000 feet left to go. Ready to get the aircraft configured for straight and level flight. 6,200, so 800 feet. And hopefully we've had the last of our technical gremlins for this evening. The last time I streamed this, the flight decided to crash halfway through, which is not ideal. Okay, 6,700, starting to bring the nose down, slow that rate of ascent. 6,900. Let's bring the prop back to 2350, there or thereabouts, and bring the power back to somewhere like 20 inches, I think. We're just overshot our altitude just a little bit there. That's okay. We'll just drop that back down just a smidge. Don't want to come down too quickly, otherwise we'll overshoot back the other way. Get the aircraft trimmed for some straight level flight. We're about 100 feet higher than we should be, so I'm gonna put some more manifold pressure back in. I mean, we're cruising at a very respectable 162 knots. This aircraft is capable of cruising comfortably at 180 knots. This is arguably the most boring leg of the journey. Not very much that goes on between the waypoints HON and CPT. Right, let's get some autopilot going on. I want to get heading initially because the G1000 has got the incorrect leg of the journey selected. It's a bit pernickety. It wants to actually travel over the waypoint rather than just near it. So let's get the autopilot on. That's gone straight to heading and altitude. Brilliant. Let's get the next leg of the journey selected. Being very careful not to delete the flight plan, as that is what comes up. Awesome sauce, right. And we're over to nav mode. Beautiful. Right, that's all working exactly as we wanted. So we've got autopilot on, we've got our altitude set at 7,000, so the aircraft's going to try and maintain that. We are following our GPS nav, get that dialed out just a little bit. Stream is still looking good. I'm just going to take just a smidge of the noise out of the game noise, just a touch. But that's, yeah, we're in good shape. That's all looking good. And as always with flying an aircraft, the challenging bit is takeoff and landing always. The bits in between, particularly on modern aircraft, I mean the G1000 is an absolutely fantastic piece of kit. It's largely monitoring, making sure that the aircraft isn't doing anything peculiar. And of course, talking to ATC, we're not doing ATC today, but we will be doing that in the future. We're going to be doing some VATSIM flying. That will be really interesting, I think. Really looking forward to getting into that, albeit somewhat intimidated by it, if I'm honest, as well, which is rather daft given I've been doing some real world flying. From a rest of the journey perspective, we will reduce our altitude once we get past CPT, because we'll be flying westerly. Then we'll drop to 6,000 so that we're at even altitudes, and we will then have a steady descent down to 2,500 feet as we hit Pomax. If you look at the flight plate, which I'm not going to risk bringing up for you just now on through fear of more technical problems, if I'm being perfectly candid, you need to maintain 2,500 on the approach into Bristol until you are 5.8 nautical miles away from it. Bristol is in a fairly hilly it has hilly terrain in that part of the world. There are lots of things like balloons and other obstacles to be avoided, so must maintain 2,500 until you're 5.8 nautical miles away from Bristol. Once you hit that 5.8 nautical miles, it's a 3-degree downward glide slope all the way to the runway, straight in. Very, very easy to do for a runway 27 landing using the ILS, which we've already got dialed in. I don't think the sun will be set just yet, so we should be able to see the runway, so we're not solely dependent on the ILS. I'm going to put a bit more manifold pressure in, I think, just slowly crank that up to 23 inches, pick up some speed, get ourselves through this leg at some relative pace. And as I was saying just before I took off, I've built myself, or I'm in the process of building a new PC. Expect a video of that on the channel in the not too distant future. Very either as a stroke of genius or as the stupidest thing that I've ever done, I have punted at sticking with the Ryzen platform despite the Alder Lake CBUs coming out literally a couple of days ago, which are somewhere in the order, from a gaming perspective, of 5 to 10% faster than the Ryzen CPUs. Actually, interestingly, on the benchmarks I saw, there was no difference whatsoever in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but that might be because they've got these efficiency cores and these performance cores. There's a lot of scheduling that needs to be done in Windows 11, so might be something to do with that. So there might be a Windows update that's coming. Interestingly, I'm almost certain all the technical problems I was having at the beginning of the stream is because the gaming PC had decided that it wanted to forcibly install a Microsoft Windows update, which was really, really helpful for it to do. But yeah, the Alder Lake stuff's got these efficiency cores and these performance cores, and so I think the lack of performance improvement on Microsoft Flight Simulator is likely due to some sort of scheduling issue going on there. But it's pretty well established, I think, at this point that Ryzen 6000 will be being certainly announced in January with a release for February. Now that's got their 3D stacked caching system that was teased quite some time ago, actually, when the Ryzen 5000 series was launched, and that's likely to be delivering somewhere in the order of a 10 to 15% improvement over the current Ryzen 5000. So I'm not particularly an AMD fanboy, but I would rather spend my money with them than Intel. I would spend my money with Intel if there was a clear performance improvement with the Intel CPUs, because ultimately I want the best performance that I can get. But I have, as I say, either as a stroke of genius or as the most stupid thing I've ever done, I have hedged my bets. I'm anticipating Ryzen 6000. I'm anticipating that that will be compatible with the motherboard that I've got. So for a new build, I have decided to go for that. I mean, the Alder Lake stuff is released in November. I mean, we could be 2 to 3 months away from Intel being knocked off the gaming podium once again, and I'm crossing my fingers that that is going to be the case. Otherwise, I'm going to be kicking myself for a very, very expensive mistake, albeit very much first world problems. We're talking about, you know, individual frames of difference. I'm sure I will cope. So the intention is to start doing altogether a lot more streaming of Microsoft Flight Simulator and Elite Dangerous, both of which I plan to do in VR. Now, notwithstanding the fact that every single time I seem to try to do this, I end up with a smorgasbord of technical problems, albeit we appear to be overcoming them today. Fingers crossed, each of the streams as we get into each subsequent one will be a little bit easier to do. But, I mean, any streamer... I watch a guy on Twitch called Malik, who streams lots of Elite Dangerous and occasionally a bit of Microsoft Flight Simulator as well, and he has no end of technical problems. He also uses a program called Voice Attack, which allows you to use your voice to give certain commands. That's particularly helpful in Elite Dangerous. I don't think it has a stronger use case in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I mean, he's either battling VR headsets not working properly or Voice Attack doing something peculiar, things of those nature. But I'm gonna struggle, I think, particularly with how well Microsoft Flight Simulator is running on this machine. I'm gonna struggle to do that on a flat screen monitor, despite the fact that that will almost certainly cause me less technical problems. I don't think that's the way that gaming's going. You see lots of mixed views on forums and on the interweb about, is, you know, VR dead? Mark Zuckerberg clearly trying hard to convince us all that he owns the future of the metaverse, but I genuinely believe this is the future of gaming, and that, you know, flat screen monitors will ultimately become a thing of the past, certainly amongst my friendship group. For those that are into gaming that haven't tried VR headsets, when they put one on and they try it, they are absolutely amazed. I've seen friends walk out from staying with me, go straight out and buy themselves a Quest 2 or an Index, and you know, they become converts very, very, very quickly indeed. Okay, we are about 13 nautical miles away from CPT, cruising at about 170 knots, so that's just shy of 200 miles per hour. Journey in the car from Coventry to Bristol would be easily 3.5 to 5 hours depending on the traffic. Unfortunately for me, a lot of my family who are down in the Bristol part of the world, unfortunately for me, more often than not when I'm travelling, that journey does seem to tend more towards the 5-hour journey side of things. I think this end-to-end from starting the aircraft up, getting it in the air, flying it, landing it, parking it, is less than an hour. Of course, you would have to add on to that driving to the airports, but it's a damn sight nicer sitting up here enjoying this beautiful virtual scenery than it would be. I mean, you wouldn't want to M25 simulator and just sit there in traffic constantly. That wouldn't be anywhere near as much fun. So I think it's reasonable to conclude that in real life this would be substantially a better way of getting about than sitting in traffic all the time. So we've got the sun setting there, we've got a crescent moon just up there, and I am absolutely staggered at just how much better the performance between these two computers were. I was on occasions getting black bars at the side on the 2080 Ti Ryzen 3000 series. If I turned my head like that, I'm getting none of that. We've got more of the graphical beautifulness switched on. We've got the render resolution at 100%. I had that at 80% on the previous machine, and I mean, this is, so far as I can perceive, and I should probably redo my Microsoft Flight Simulator VR performance, but I'm sure that there will be some motion reprojection going on. But if there is, it's being done very, very, very well indeed, and I can't notice it. It's as smooth as a simulator needs to be, in my opinion. Okay, coming up on CPT. We'll move over to our heading bug just so that we can cut the corner off of this just a smidge rather than fly over CPT completely itself. Nice to dip the wing, get a look at that beautiful scenery as well. Okay, and get our altitude down to 6,000, vertical speed down of, oh, I don't know, 700 feet per minute. No need to take any manifold pressure off. We're just going to let the aircraft speed up. So just coming up on 180 knots. Indicated airspeed, of course, not ground speed. That's about 207 miles an hour. Right, let's get the next leg activated because that's not picked up automatically. Being careful as always not to delete the flight plan. Brilliant. Right, that's in. Let's get ourselves back onto navigation. GPS. And we're actually going to drop our altitude down to 2,500. So this is the standard approach for Bristol. It's going to take us into runway 27 for an ILS landing. Must maintain 2,500 feet until we are 5.8 nautical miles away from Bristol. We've got plenty of time. I'm actually going to just start taking some manifold pressure out now, start getting the aircraft slowing down. We don't want to be rushing as we get into Bristol. Get that map just zoomed out a smidge more. That's probably enough. I need to keep that manifold pressure coming back. Of course, we're descending now, so our manifold pressure is going to rise because the air is getting thicker and thus therefore has more pressure. Okay, we're descending at a rate of about 600 feet per minute. We're just coming up on 5,000 feet. And we're less than halfway through the leg, so we've got plenty of time. We've done 2,500, we've done 2,000 feet. We've got 2,500 feet left to go, plenty of time. It's all about time management as you're coming in for a landing, getting ahead of yourself, getting as much done ahead of time as you can, not getting yourself under pressure and in a rush as you come into a busy landing. Keep that manifold pressure coming back because it's been creeping up on us. We probably want to get that back to 20 inches if we can. We don't want to take the manifold pressure out too quickly. About an inch a minute if we can is ideal. That's at 23 inches. Approaching 4,000 feet and just a smidge over the halfway point of this leg of the journey. Okay, that's 4,000 feet. We're coming up to now 1,500 feet left to go. Ourselves down to 22 inches of manifold pressure, just start losing some of that speed. Of course, as we pitch up the nose, as we level off at 2,500 feet, we're going to lose some speed as we do that. We're probably going to get a first notch of flaps in around 7 nautical miles away from Bristol, something like that. At 5.8 nautical miles, we're going to be pitching down about 3 degrees, and then we'll be straight in for a landing at Bristol. Just bring that throttle up back a little bit. There we go, at 21 inches. It's getting a little dark in here, so I think we'll get the panel lights on. And just under 10 nautical miles away from Pomax, and we've got the timing of that absolutely spot on. Absolutely incredible graphics in this. I've been messing around with flight simulators for, well, decades, frankly, at this point, and my wife and I were talking about 10 years ago when we lived in southeast London, and me playing with flight simulators on a flat screen monitor, and never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that you'd have this kind of gear, VR headsets. It's just, I mean, it's just, you almost take the stuff for granted when you've got it, but you forget just how lucky we are to have stuff like this. Whether it's as entertainment or as a training aid. We've got an airport just down there in front of us. Not the one that we're landing at. It's Bristol International Airport that we're landing at. Just coming up on our 2,500 feet with almost 5 nautical miles left to go. That's excellent. Okay, well, so despite some technical faux pas at the beginning, we seem to have got there. Going to be using a heading bug quite a bit when we do this. We're not going to want to follow our GPS route exactly, because that won't get us quite lined up for the ILS approach for Bristol. And we're going to want to go slightly south of that route and then straighten ourselves up. Should be a nice, easy approach in. Okay, about 1.5 nautical miles. Keep the throttle coming back. That's just crept up on us again. So 21 inches. Pull that back again in about a minute. And get ourselves down for 20 inches. Start getting the aircraft set up for a landing. Still on autopilot at this point in time, but we will be taking the autopilot off. I think we're going to start using the heading bug to steer us. Okay, just over 24 nautical miles from Bristol, so got plenty of time to get ourselves all set up. As I've said a number of times, we must maintain 2,500 until we are 5.8 nautical miles away from Bristol. We can see that on our GPS, on the G1000. Sun just setting in the distance there. I'm just going to pull my chair in a smidge closer. There we go, yeah. Perfect. Okay. Bring us back down to 20 inches of manifold pressure. And that should, as we get our flaps in, get us to sort of the right sorts of speeds that we want to be at the right legs of that journey. And the next time I do one of these, I'm going to get, there's a thing called FS Kneeboard, I think it's called, which allows you to have checklists and things like that in VR. It just adds that little bit of extra immersion, which I think is fun. Alright, so we're going to switch off of the GPS on the CDI and get that onto the ILS for Bristol. As I said earlier, we're going to start flying just that bit south of our GPS route, just to help, you know, we would be getting vectored if we were using ATC. We're obviously not using ATC on this flight, so we'll role play that that's what's happening. Just wait until we get past this airfield, and then we'll vector ourselves in for a runway 27 landing. Sun just disappearing over the horizon there. Get the floodlights on in the cabin. Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to leave the floodlights off, I think. There's enough with the panel lights, I don't need that distraction. Right, we're just coming past that airfield. We are 50 nautical miles away. Get rid of that microphone for a second. We're going to start a turn to the left, start getting ourselves lined up on that ILS. Still maintaining that 2,500 feet until we are 5.8 nautical miles away from Bristol Airport. And I mean, I'm going to just take the autopilot off at that point and fly her down. Should be able to start seeing the airport, which I think I can see just off diagonally there in the distance. In fact, I'm certain that that's it. That body of water is a bit of a marker for us. Sort of fly at it and slightly to the left. And just as it starts to disappear under our nose, we're going to want to start to turn into Bristol. Yeah, I can definitely see the runway there in the distance. Sort of hybrid IFR VFR flight this. It's VFR really, isn't it? But using the GPS and an ILS. Okay. I'll just start our turn now, otherwise that needle, that green needle is going to get away from us and we're going to overshoot. 9.5 nautical miles away. See that needle starting to come in. Closer that gets to us, the shallower we want to be retrospective to the final approach. Yeah, that's coming in nicely. Perfect. Right, 8 nautical miles out. Let's get our first notch of flaps in. Still on autopilot, so the autopilot's going to do all the work of adjusting the trim for us for that change. And we're looking good. Okay, just coming down to 150 knots. Okay, we're lined up nicely. 6 nautical miles. And that is 5.8. Right, autopilot off. Second notch of flaps. And start our descent. Okay. Let's go high RPM on the propellers, and let's get our gear down. We want to be about 100 knots. That helps us maintain stability. When you get too slow this far up, when you turn, you just don't get the responsiveness on the aircraft. Get a bit of trim in. We're putting quite a lot of back pressure on there. And that's looking okay. We're probably a bit high, but not hugely so. Still difficult to make out the pappy. Oh no, we're too red, too white. So we're bob on the glide slope. We're nicely configured, nicely trimmed. Use some power to get the nose up. So power to control our rate of descent. Pitch ourselves up and down to slow down or speed up. A little bit fast. So start bringing some power up. Just trim ourselves up. Okay, that's not bad. Just a little bit more trim in. Perfect, okay. We want to be 90 knots as we cross the threshold. Right, we're 3 green, the gear is down. We have high RPM. We're full flaps. Start bringing the power down. 96 knots, keep bringing the power back. $93. $92. A little bit low, but nothing to worry about. We are 90 knots on the money. Fight for that center line and off the power. Oh, a little bit of ballooning. I brought that nose down a bit more abruptly than I would have liked. Right, flaps up. Not my best landing, but not terrible either. Toe brakes. Toe brake. Oh, we've overshot that some. That's recoverable though. Alright, taxi off here. Of course, if we're using ATC, we would be stopping there. We'd be getting some ATC instructions, but we'll find ourselves a nice place to park. Clearly this is where the big airliners would go, but rather than traipse all the way across the airport, we'll take ourselves in here. Okay, parking brake on. And kill engine 1. I'll kill engine 2. Okay. So a few technical problems again, folks. Apologies for those, but my hairs, I've got VR hair. We've certainly done a better job of that than the last time. We're going to continue to tweak the setup and see if we can get this perfected, but hopefully you enjoyed that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the flight. What did I do well? What could I have done better? What do you think of the setup overall? I'm always interested in what you might want to see from a future content perspective, so please drop that down in the comments below.